Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello everybody and welcome to Game Over Vancouver, celebrating a huge victory, finally, the first of the year. JT Miller in overtime to give the Canucks the W after a hard-fought game against their adversary, the Florida Panthers. I am your host, Zach Clarke, joined by the one and only Lachlan Irvin. And Lachlan, lest anyone does not know who you are, give us a brief introduction.
Well, I mean, if for most of the population, I'm Lachlan Irvin. I write for Canucks Army, yeah, I've been on this show kind of in the past before, back when it was in a different network. But now, yeah, it's exciting to be here with you, Zach.
Absolutely, and even more exciting to be able to have some positive news in our life. The Canucks getting a win. I was worried there for a bit, I won't lie. I thought the Canucks played really, really well, especially in the third period, but in overtime, back and forth, huge win by JT Miller. That being said, let's start it in the first period. And I didn't love the start for the Canucks, especially in their own end. I thought a lot of the things that we'd discussed in previous matches were coming to light again. Forwards missing their own coverage in their own end and not being exactly sure where to be. Didn't love the start to it, but you know what? Got the first goal off of Bluger, and in the first period, bit shaky, but I didn't hate it overall, didn't love it.
Yeah, I think they got the opportunities when they were presented to them, and particularly, I mean, the Teddy Bluger goal being, I mean, talk about like kind of a lucky video review call there, where it very easily could have been waved off, just of how close it was to the line. Eventually, we got a look at the camera angle that showed that it was clearly in. But that's such a bang play for them to check quickly and not just assume that the puck went in the net or wasn't in the net was a big break. The Panthers end up tying it pretty quick after that. But I think that first period they looked a little bit wobbly, but but once they got their legs out from underneath them, they kind of been picked up as they went along there.
No, absolutely. I thought that was a review that, like Shorthouse said on the call, I didn't think it went in on most angles. That is until the final angle where we saw just that tiny, tiny bit of white. So definitely a bit of puck luck there for Teddy Bluger. Then, yeah, as you said, back the other way, 11 seconds after the Canucks scored, the Panthers evened it up. And that was the biggest example to me where it was a man losing coverage. I think I've got it written down here where... Yeah, Danton Heinen, I thought, really lost his man, ended up checking the same man that Nils Amon was already on, and that led to the open player on the back door. And as we'd mentioned before, in the last few games, there was quite a lot of that happening last couple of games. This game, only a couple examples, but a team like the Panthers are going to punish you for errors like that. You know, only once or twice a game is enough for a team like Florida. So I didn't love that coverage breakdown, but... I mean, a good goal by Florida, a little bit of a lucky bounce in front. That pass was not intended for that player on the back door. But, and then, of course, those were the two goals for that period, but plenty of other chances as well. Poor Elias Pettersson. I hate to get the PD discourse started this early on into our show, but he had that amazing chance, goes off the crossbar in front, and I feel bad for him because he just really can't get a single bounce to go his way. I didn't think he had a bad game, although like we've said before, I didn't think he had a really dominant game where he took over, but just that chance in front really felt like that's the kind of goal that goes in 9 times out of 10 and just didn't go.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was Pettersson's best game of the season so far. I think he looked a lot more like his usual self in this game. He was definitely getting frustrated at times, but I mean, you look at some of like the stats and stuff, like even when he wasn't necessarily like putting points on the board, he had, I think, about like 4 blocks. He had 3 hits. He was making things happen when he was on the ice. Like, there's no doubt about it. Whether or not that ended up creating points, he was clearly engaged in the play, and he was clearly a net positive when he was on the ice, as opposed to, you know, other players that might not necessarily be able to say the same thing. And for him, like, it is a little bit of like baby steps where it's like, okay, eventually 1 point, if he can get 1 goal to break through, the dam will probably burst. So I'm not sounding any alarms on him at this point. He's a good enough player that, you know, he'll figure it out eventually. And again, I think games like today prove that he's still a very good player, even when he is not scoring. And that's frankly what you want from your best players.
No, absolutely. I mean, there was that shift where he had 2 or 3 shot blocks in a row, but I just felt bad for him because, eventually, especially with all the criticism, gotta find your way onto the score sheet. Today is actually the 40th game now that it has been since he last registered an even strength goal, which is quite a lot of games in a row, but I agree. A lot of really great signs for PD. I think if he keeps playing like that every night, goals will come. Doesn't help you're against one of the best goaltenders in the league, Bobrovsky, who played excellently tonight. I know, of course, ups and downs, but tonight I thought was an up for him. Let's go the other way in terms of goaltenders. I was very impressed with Kevin Lankinen's play. Now, you, of course, yourself are a goalie guru. What were your thoughts on Lankinen? Because I thought outside of playing the puck, he was excellent. I really didn't like a lot of what I saw playing the puck. There was a couple things where he gave up some pretty good chances by missing, tape-to-tape passes to his defenders. But in terms of making saves, which is what you want your goaltenders to do first and foremost, I thought he was great tonight.
Yeah, Lankinen looked great. He matched Bobrovsky pound for pound in this game. He didn't necessarily have to make as many, I would say, 5 alarm saves as Bobrovsky did, but he was solid when he was called upon, and that is as the best you can get for a goaltender who is not your normal starter, who's clearly in a situation where he is battling just to get ice time and starts. The puck playing, that's an interesting dynamic. He's very active out of his crease, which I'll be honest, I don't hate that. I do think that the Canucks don't necessarily want a goaltender who's roaming to play the puck too often, but as far as guys who are willing to challenge far out of the paint and attack the shooter a little bit from like when they're coming down off the wing and everything, I think he looked really solid. I think he's really good about that. His ability to, when he drops into that butterfly, he's able to push out and he's aggressive on the shots. I think are great. Like I think that one save off AJ Greer, I think that would have been in the third period, I believe. It might have been the second, but where he just he stops the initial breakaway and then he sees Greer kind of about to try and tap the puck in off to the far side, and he squares out and drops and makes sure he challenges out as he's doing so. So it cuts off way more of that angle, as opposed to if he had just stayed where he was frozen and tried to kick the leg out, it wouldn't have covered nearly as much. So I think that's the type of game and the confidence builder from your goaltender that the Canucks have been looking for. Not that Artur Shelov's wasn't good in the last game. I think he was really, really good in that as well. But just as far as a close game like this, especially a game where there were almost kind of looked like they were about to get goalied by Bobrovsky, I think the fact that they walked out of here with a win, like that's a huge feather in Lankinen's cap for sure.
Absolutely. I will say, I am interested to see how they manage the netminders heading forth, because of course it's been an even 2-2 split. I am interested to see whether they start to give Lankinen the lion's share of starts, because while I haven't been unimpressed with Seelovs, I haven't been impressed either, and I thought that Lankinen has held his own in these games really well. So, I mean, what do you think? Do they think they should keep kind of trying to split them as 50-50 as possible, or would you want to see one take over the crease until Demko's back?
I think right now, I think you kind of maybe do want to go a little bit off riding the hot hand if I'm Rick Tocchet. I think maybe, Lankinen has been good. He has a win now. I think you could have beforehand chalked it up to, well, neither goaltender has won yet, so they're on even footing as far as I'm concerned, kind of thing, if I'm the coach. But now that Lankinen has a win under his belt, I think it would be smart to go back to him for the game against Philly just to kind of set a little bit of a winning tempo kind of thing. Don't change too much when you win. As far as Seelovs is concerned, I think just as he gets more games and more opportunities, though, I think that's still going to be really crucial. I think if you completely just, nail him to the bench, it's not going to really do him any favors, especially his confidence. And as again, like I look at the Tampa game as like he wasn't necessarily, maybe he didn't wow you particularly, but I think as far as a game goes where he was making every save that he needed to, the Tampa game was really good evidence of that for Shelovs. He was doing a much better job of tracking the puck and following the play, especially out at the point, which has been the calling card for him. Tampa actually kind of did him a huge favor by shooting so much from there that he got almost a lot of practice off of it that I think is going to serve him well as he goes. But as far as what the Canucks need right now, especially being having a record of like 1-1-2. Maybe you ride Lankinen a little bit, just give him a run and see how he does until a loss on the board again, and then you go back to Shilovs.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that. I really like what I've seen from Lankinen, and not just this year, but of course last year in Nashville, one of the best, analytically, one of the best backups in the league, was 12th in goals saved above expected, and that counts starters too, so I'd be happy to see what he can give to the team. Talking about some other lineup decisions, of course, the franchise in for the first time for the Canucks tonight. Of course, I also do enjoy the Ottawa Senators, and so I got to see him a lot out there, and I never thought that he was given a super fair shot in Ottawa. Obviously, given a lot of ice time, given a lot of games, but playing alongside some of the analytically worst defensemen in the league. I mean, he was mostly stapled to Travis Hamonic, who just wasn't very good in those years. So I do want to see what Branson can do in a bigger shot in Vancouver, playing alongside just a little bit better caliber defenders. Didn't necessarily, and again, kind of like what I was saying with Shilovs, didn't wow me, didn't unimpress me either. I thought his ability to get the puck out of his own end under pressure was a lot better than what we've seen from the other third pairing defenders in Vancouver in Desharnais and Forbort. I thought that Brandstrom did a pretty good job of that, but on the flip side, some of the things that we've seen concerning him about his smaller stature, inability to win battles in his own end, I also did see some of that. And the offensive upside wasn't there as much in the NHL as it was in those crazy AHL highlights. So I'd like to see him stay in the lineup, but I didn't think he exactly had a world-ending game either way.
No, but you know what? Like for him, especially, and I saw like people after the Tampa game saying that, oh, Brandstrom's not going to help the Canucks defensively. And admittedly, yeah, that's not necessarily his biggest skill, but based on the way that the Canucks have been playing in their own end, with the exception of Quinn Hughes, like, it wasn't going to get much worse. Like, even just looking at, like, sure, Brandstrom's a little smaller, on the smaller side. He's not necessarily going to be a huge intimidating force in the defensive end, but I think the fact is the Canucks have been missing another puck moving defenseman so badly that frankly it didn't matter too much. I think Brandstrom was an instant, just like made a difference on that blue line, as far as having somebody who can get the puck out, who isn't automatically just kind of there to be a bit of I don't want to say a pylon too early in the season, but some of the defensemen have definitely been struggling matchup wise. I mean, even today, like the goals that went in, I don't think Brandstrom was on the ice for either of those. And there were both cases of like a clear assignment missed in close, and that was not the only time that happened in the game when the pucks were going in. So I think the Canucks are in a situation where they can try this out with Brandstrom, give him a little string of games, and I don't think it's going to affect them in their own end any more than it would be to, say, have Noah Juleson in there or Vinny Desharnais in there. I think that he has a skill that makes enough of a difference when he's on the ice that he can help make improvements in that regard. But they're still definitely in need of some additional forwards or defensemen as well.
No, I agree. I think especially a top four defender would be quality. I mean, obviously, all the rumors surrounding Rasmus Andersson, although with the start the Flames have had, they might not sell at all. They might go for it all this year. We'll see with how good they've been. But of course, I agree, a top four defender would be nice. But I think Brandstrom, kind of a perfect third pairing guy along Desharnais, because Desharnais has exactly what Brandstrom doesn't, which is the size, ability to win those physical battles. So I liked that pairing overall. Looking at some other lineup decisions up front, would you like to see Daniel Sprong coming back into the lineup? And I say that in place of probably Baines, as I kind of torn on Baines. I didn't think that he had a bad game, but I did think that he had a couple chances where you can't help but think that someone who does have the offensive upside like Sprong would have buried. And I also don't think that Baines was so great defensively that it makes up for how bad Sprong is defensively. And I kind of think if you're going to have two forwards that aren't contributing that much to their own end, go with the one that's got the higher offensive upside.
I would agree with that. I would say for me anyway, I would say unfortunately Nils Aman is maybe the bigger odd man out there. I mean, especially in this game, he had a really he had a particularly missed opportunity or missed assignment on that first goal of the game. I think like the Jesper Bachfist goal, like that was his man that he was not paying much attention to, and so it was, and Bachfist was just able to walk in there. I think yeah, Sprong. There is a little bit of a difference now. Obviously, now that they've won a game, and again, you want knowing what kind of a coach Rick Tocchet is. He's definitely the don't mess with a winning lineup type of coach. So I'd be in a way, I'd almost be surprised if Sprong did get back in there for any reason other than an injury. But I also really think that Sprong sitting for 2 games was a little bit of a move I wouldn't have necessarily made. I think what Sprong brings, especially as a shooter, is really vital, especially right now when the Canucks have, especially after the game against Tampa as well. Even in this game to a degree where they're kind of struggling to finish, I think Sprong has the finishing ability that would make him a real help for the offensively if you gave him an opportunity. Maybe you don't necessarily put him back out there in a penalty kill, but I think I would like to see Sprong come back into the lineup sooner rather than later.
No, 100%. And some other things that I thought went right for the Canucks in terms of offense was the rush looked a lot more deadly tonight. I think that they've had struggles, especially against Tampa Bay. Did a great job at keeping the Canucks to the outside. Then we were forced to try to cycle it back around and then, losing board battles. And that was kind of what happened last game. But this game, I thought the Rush did a really great job at maintaining possession and being able to break in and get some shots on net. One person in particular whose shots on net was a lot better this game than it has been all season was Quinn Hughes. Getting shots through traffic was a pretty big obstacle to his game the first few games of the season. Obviously, scored one tonight, but had a few other good opportunities. And I thought in general, the Canucks offense looked a lot more dynamic tonight than it has at any other point this season in terms of both being deadly when it's already set up and creating chances almost off of nothing on the rush. There was a lot of times where, coming through the neutral zone, I didn't think something was going to happen, and they were able to turn nothing into a chance. And Bobrovsky made some really, really nice saves at many different points tonight.
Yeah, and you and I were talking before the show about just how this game in particular could have really, like, if it had flipped to Florida, just how frustrating a game this would have been, like, knowing, like, off of how they lost the Calgary game, and now they're in a situation where even though they're playing a good game, they're getting goalied, but it matters so much more because of how the first 3 games went, that could have really, like, been a momentum or a positivity killer for the locker room. But, like, Quinn Hughes was one of those players who was like, I'm not going to let that happen today. Like, he was everywhere. He had, I think, the most shot opportunities of any Canuck, I think, in this game. He was shooting the puck with a purpose. Even though they weren't all necessarily on net, he was clearly trying to will his team back into the game. And that goal on Bobrovsky was unbelievable. Like, that was such, like, it doesn't look necessarily like a pretty goal, especially from the camera angle in Florida, where it kind of just goes through a sea of players and goes in. But the amount of power he puts into that shot for a player who's often who's been critiqued in the past about being too small and not being like a tough enough of a tough guy, like the fact that he can rip a shot like that with that kind of weight behind it is incredible. Like, there was, like, you look at the replay, and Bobrovsky was looking for it after it was already in the net. So yeah, this is a game, like, those are the kinds of games where you're really reminded, like, why Quinn Hughes is not only a defending Norris champion, but also deserves to be, if things go well for the Canucks, he's the kind of player that should be, like, higher in the Hart conversation even for MVP. Just those are the kinds of nights for him.
No, I completely agree. I mean, if we see another, 90-point season from him, potentially even more with just how consistently good he is night in, night out, I agree, could 100% be in that conversation, especially when you consider the fact that the Hart is often relative to how well your team performs. And you think back to that year, Taylor Hall won it, basically just because he had 50 points above anyone else. That's what it feels like a lot of these games for Quinn Hughes, is while points-wise, he might not be that far ahead of Miller or Pettersson, but his impact on the game and how much he takes over the game is on just another level for anyone else on this team. And that's why people will say, Miller and Pettersson are the stars. Quinn Hughes is the star, night in, night out, so consistent at everything. I mean, in his own end, getting the puck to the net offensively, he's just kind of a wizard. Watching him skate as well is just a treat to be able to watch. I think that is good to do it for the first period. Shall we move on to the second if you are ready?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so we'll head on over to the second period. And of course, when we check out the flagship show of Game Over Network, Hyperdrive Hockey sponsors the second period. All things hockey across various leagues in multiple countries. Whatever it is and whenever it is, Max and Daphne have you covered for all your hockey news with some fun Star Wars references mixed in. And who doesn't love Star Wars? If you say not you, you are a liar. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Here on YouTube, there on podcast listening apps, wherever. And we'll see if my face cam wants to readjust to my face or if I'm going to be blurry for the next few minutes. We'll have to take it as it goes. So, for the second period here, honestly, yeah, I thought the Canucks had a much better second. I thought that they got better as the game went along in general. I thought the third period was the best, but the second period as well. My first note was that the Pettersson, Höglander, and Garland line looked great. You know, Garland and Höglander have been some of the biggest play drivers of this team in terms of energy and momentum all season for the first 3 games. And I thought that didn't slow down, and I think it worked really well with Pettersson. I think that he just hasn't been able to generate that much of the energy himself, but when you're playing with 2 guys that are able to drive that, it looked really good, and so I thought their line looked really good that period. Bobrovsky made some unreal saves early on. Of course, you think of that Pettersson-DeBrusk 2-on-1. You think that Brock Besser slap shot off JT Miller. I mean, some outright amazing chances stopped by Bob, but the second period, I think the Canucks ended up being a lot better, and a big turning point in the game, biggest turning point for me, was that failed challenge by the Florida Panthers on the second goal.
Yeah, that was okay. That was okay, listen, I know that's in the rules that you can challenge for that. And listen, Paul Maurice is a Stanley Cup winning coach now. He's got a little bit more I'm sure got a little bit more guts of like, well, listen, I won a cup. What do you I know what's best kind of thing. The audacity to challenge for the puck hitting Nils Aman's glove and deflecting back is the one of the most insane things I've ever seen. I know it's permitted. I think that is such a dumb thing to permit. To challenge for that, especially because it ends up having essentially nothing to do with the goal by the time the puck actually ends up in the net. Challenges have gone too far. This is just more evidence of that. When they got that delay of game penalty because it counted because it was too inconclusive to tell. I was like, good. As much as as someone who loves watching the Panthers and has watched a lot of their games over the last decade, like they're the team I've watched second. Like the Canucks are the only team I've watched more than Florida. It's just like that. You deserve that delay of game penalty so much for that. Just for the audacity to challenge that. Thank goodness that wasn't called back.
See, I'm gonna take the other side on this. Now, I thought it was when I first saw the challenge come through, I was like, wow, that's gonna come back. I think it was a well spotted thing by Florida. I think they got kind of screwed over by just the different camera angles that we had available. It wasn't conclusive. Therefore, the referees did make the right call. I agree with the call, but I did think it was pretty gutsy to go for that challenge because of course it was such a pivotal moment. And I do think it came off his glove. I do agree with what you said at the start there. It doesn't matter. Like, that does not matter. Challenges like that, it's like those offside challenges where it's, his skate was 1/2 of a millimeter on the wrong side of the line. Like, yeah. Okay, to the letter of the law, you might be right, but like, shut up. Let it happen. It counts.
It's why are we trying to take offense away in a game that needs where more goals is good for the viewing audience. Like it's not even that I disagree with them challenging at all. Like, I understand why they would want to challenge for anything that they can spot. It is kind of impressive that they spotted it, that kind of a play that quickly. But again, it's just like, this is the most insane niche, like, minor thing to challenge for. Are we going to start challenging for just anytime anything happens on a play now? Like, this is it's ridiculous. It's far too ridiculous that this is like that this is allowed to be challenged by coaches. And I know the league is on this kick of like, oh, we want to get the calls right on these goals. It's like, well, where are you for all the other like missed penalties and everything like that in this game? Instead of trying to take offense away, let's focus maybe on just how many times a player gets hit interfered with behind the play, or like has a hand slashed or something, if that's what you're worried about. Like, why is it always about this very minuscule play in the grand scheme of a game that we're challenging for?
No, I completely agree. I think some of the things that are being challenged are pretty ridiculous. I'm waiting for the day where some player, you know how all the players like to chew on their mouth guards when they're not in properly. I'm waiting till that comes back for an equipment violation penalty because they were chewing on their mouth guard while entering the blue line. Yeah, jokes aside, I did think that was a pretty pivotal moment in the game. That being said, didn't love the Canucks power play. It didn't look lifeless, but I think it was excellent either way. I thought the break-in, especially on the power play, didn't look excellent. A lot of players just kind of standing at the blue line waiting for one person to carry it in. Not a whole lot of movement without the puck on the break-in. And I thought the Florida's penalty kill did do a good job standing up on the blue line and denying entries on certain power plays. But at the same time, I think there is still a little bit of kinks to be ironed out on the Canucks power play.
Yeah, and that's something that they're clearly working on. Obviously, part of that is just them not necessarily they're not doing the same stuff that they would say if Pettersson was lighting the world on fire, kind of thing, where like I definitely noticed in the Tampa game, for example, where there were a couple times where Hughes was taking the place where Pettersson usually is, parked in the face-off circle for the one-timer kind of thing, and Pettersson was back as like a defenseman almost. And that was interesting, to see from them. They're figuring things out. They also, I will say, in this particular game, they didn't get a lot of opportunities to really showcase anything or really get any momentum with the power play going. I think they had two power plays the entire game or something like that. Like,
Yeah,
not
you're
a
right.
particularly like eventful night for the power play to really get going. But I mean, as far as penalties go, we should talk about the Teddy Bluger Uvis Balinskis fight, because that was hilarious, just in terms of the sheer unlikeliness of two Latvians being on the ice at the same time in an NHL game to fight. I think Patrick Johnston of the Province said that was the first time two Latvians had ever fought each other in an NHL game. So that was interesting to see, just because of out of the sure, like, I didn't even have you guys fighting like anyone else on the ice, like, but let alone each other.
I know, it'll be interesting to see if what the apologies like on the Olympic Committee in a couple of years, assuming both of them qualify for said team. And if we are going to talk about power plays, I think we should talk about the power play the other way, because that was a pretty big error in my mind in the second period, was, of course, that late tie-in goal by Anton Lundell on the Panthers power play, where he was just given a free walk to the net. And I do understand that, of course, when you're on the power play, man down, you got to go for the passing coverage as opposed to being able to check each individual person. However, if you look at the play, when Lundell's cutting to the net, there's a Canuck to the right of him in the corner on that man. I forget who that was. I apologize. Don't have it written down here. But whoever that is, Carson Soucy, yeah, you've got to step up and take the man there, because the passing option down low is not a threat. I mean, he's in the corner. It's not a scoring threat. He can get the pass off there to no worry. Whether allowing him to cut straight to the front of the net, clearly a scoring threat. It went in. And sure, maybe you do want Lankinen to be making those saves. I mean, pretty good shot right above the pad below the blocker. Hard save to make. But I really would like to see the player being stepped up on there. And I think, again, just goes back to the Canucks, and this will be ironed out as the season goes along, but not really knowing who is yet to be supposed to be taking who in the defensive zone coverage. And I think for the most part, as the season's gone along, that's been more on the forwards. But yeah, Carson Soucy there, I thought he needed to step up and take his man on that play.
Yeah, the mistake Soucy makes is, I believe it's Verhaeghe down in the corner, as I believe the one with the puck, and Soucy finishes his check in the corner, which takes him out of the play essentially for a couple seconds, and he way oversells the fear of Verhaeghe coming in and taking a shot from that corner, like you said. And so I think Tyler Myers is the defenseman back left, and I think he plays it correctly where it's Sam Reinhart right in the slot area, like of course you have to take him away. And a lot of that comes down to, I think Susie way oversells it and leaves them in a situation where Lundell has way too much time to walk into that spot and just rip it. And I don't think there was much Lankinen could have done about it. You can't, like, and that again, that comes back to what we were talking about in the first period, just like you can't give the Panthers shooters that much time and space. At any point you're gonna burn, and not just for this particular game, but for prepping for the future. Like, you do not want to be giving guys that much time and space to get a shot at your goaltender, because sooner than later it's gonna burn you, and in this case it did.
No, absolutely. I think really well summed up. You can't have your goaltender bailing you out on every play, and that was a really great A scoring opportunity given up. Although overall, again, Lankinen looked really great in that period. I have 3 separate notes here saying, wow, great save by Lankinen. Of course, Bobrovsky the other way. And I mentioned that the line of Pettersson, Garland, and Höglander did look good in that period, but also we saw 3 separate really good chances tonight for Pettersson and DeBrusk. So I think we should put those 2 back together. I think the only way you're going to continue to be able to build off flashes of chemistry is with time and reps together on the same line. But my question that I'll pose to you is, if you are going to reunite DeBrusk and Pettersson, who goes on that other wing? Because right now, I'm not sure. I don't think there have been any real standout players to be able to go in there. You could run with Höglander, as I thought he looked good, but primarily tonight, I thought Höglander looked best alongside Garland, not necessarily Pettersson. But I thought DeBrusk and Petey looked good. I mean, what are your thoughts on that line?
It's if you're putting DeBrusk back with Pettersson, I think there's not really a right winger that you're itching to put back with him, unless you say brought back Sprong onto that second line. I really do like Höglander as a play driver, and I think that eventually there might have to come a point, especially with your third line, a case of like Höglander and Garland, like generally if they're not with Pettersson, they're your third line. You can't get too attached to those lines, as great as they are. And I look at Höglander as a guy that I would want playing with Pettersson or frankly Garland too. Like, either of them, if you place either of them with Pettersson and DeBrusk, I think you're in for a much like better time as far as like setting up plays and getting scoring chances goes. But yeah, that comes down to the fact of, like, are you comfortable enough with your bottom 6 that you can do that you feel you can split up Garland and Höglander? Because I think that's the obvious move here, especially if you're talking and you're not going to put Sprong back in your lineup. Because Höglander and Garland have been the Canucks' best 2 players, I think, so far to start the season, as far as like the forwards go, have been the most dangerous. They've created the most opportunities. They're routinely smothering teams in the offensive zone. I would love to see them get more opportunities to play bigger roles.
No, absolutely. And I do, of course, think that the return of Dakota Joshua will give you a lot more flexibility, because then you do kind of have your third line built as you want it. And then, of course, a little bit more flexibility up and down the lineup, which hopefully he will, of course, be back soon. Wishing the best for him. My final note for the second period was, I do want to see the Canucks, very simple note here, hit the net. The amount of amazing chances they had where the shots just aren't going on target. Not blocked, not anything like that, just missing the net outright. I know that, that's easy for me to sit in my room and say, oh, just hit the net. But seriously, some of these chances, I think Brock Besser had one that was just infuriating me, where it's a perfect pass, cross ice, goes for the one-timer, and then not only was Bob not in the best position, if he hits the net, it probably goes in, but because he misses, ricochets all the way around the boards and out again, thus nullifying a great chance on the rebound. So I do just want to see them just hit the net.
Yeah, I mean, that's the name of the game, isn't it? You just got to be making sure you're getting pucks on net as often as you can. I mean, in this game in particular, like I'll say, they had 33 shots on goal, so they weren't not getting pucks on net in this particular game. But there were, I mean, even of the shots that did make it on goal, there were a couple here or there that I looked at where I was like, okay, I think you've got to have a different, you gotta make the play a little differently there. Like Jake DeBrusk had one where he corralled it in the like around the hash marks, and if he had just kind of whipped it, which is not necessarily the most like strategic play to make, and you obviously would prefer to settle it and shoot. I think he made a mistake in that moment of settling the puck before shooting because Bobrovsky didn't know where it was, and he had some open room off his blocker side. I think if he just spins and shoots, in that case, it ended up getting blockered away just because he gave Bobrovsky a little time to reset, essentially. Those are the kinds of plays that I look at where I'm like, okay, I would like to see you maybe have a little bit more confidence to just throw it at the net and give it an opportunity to get a weird bounce maybe, or a rebound, just something wonky like that. Overall, though, again, I think in today's game, I think they did a pretty decent job of at least in other games, there were problems where it's like, oh, they're not even getting shots to the net, like, or not even getting, like, they're not even getting a lot of scoring chances, regardless of whether they hit the net or not. So I think in this game, that's an improvement overall for sure.
Yeah, no, that is completely fair enough. I do think that the offense, this was probably the best game we've seen from them overall, in my mind at least. Yep, insert Gretzky quote here, miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I feel like I'm ready to head to the third. What about you, Lachlan?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. Of course, third period. Please check out our merch. The QR code is on the screen in the bottom right-hand corner. Merch flashing on the screen. You can get Game Over merch. We got mugs, we got t-shirts, we got hoodies, and all of it helps support the independent Canucks coverage you are listening to right now. So if you want to check out the merch and be able to support what we do here at Game Over Vancouver, we appreciate it so much if you are able to help us out, or if you just want some cool swagger to be able to show off for you and your Canucks friends. So now, yeah, heading into the third frame of play here. My first three notes are all, wow, Bobrovsky is good. The Canucks came out of the gate really hard in the third period. I think the first 6 minutes, the Panthers looked to not just be on the back foot, but be on the back knee. They were barely hanging on in the first 6 minutes. The Canucks just dominant, changing on the fly. All lines looked good. Line changes looked good. Up and down, defense, offense. So many chances. And really, if Bobrovsky had not made, 5 or 6 amazing saves, that could have been, the Canucks could have put that one away early in the third.
Yeah, the Bobrovsky had himself a great game. Like, there's a reason he's a Stanley Cup champion goaltender. I mean, he gets ragged on at times for sure. He has a few games where he goes a little ice cold. He'll have seasons where he goes totally ice cold. But they won the Stanley Cup with him in net for a reason. That's because he is absolutely able to steal you games the way that here in Vancouver we know like Thatcher Demko has been able to do in seasons past. Obviously, this is a different sort of game where, the Panthers are missing a lot of key guys like Barkov and Tkachuk due to injuries, or I think in Tkachuk's case it was an illness. But those types of players missing from your lineup makes a huge difference. And the Panthers being able to not only hang into this game, but eventually later on kind of play up to the Canucks level just shows you that's how deep a Stanley Cup winning team has to be. That's where the Canucks need to get to over time. They're getting way closer than they ever have been, especially on the forward side of things. But man, when you look at that Panthers lineup, especially just how they're able to, even when they're not necessarily playing up to their best, to their standards, they are still such a tough out. They will not give you an easy 2 points regardless of who's in the lineup or who's not.
No, absolutely, and I do think that is something that the Canucks do really miss in Demko, is there were several, well, as we all know, several games, every season that Demko's healthy where he steals those games, and I don't think that either Lankinen or Stilovs is going to be giving you that, but what they are going to be giving you is a chance to win if you play well enough. So Canucks, if they play well enough, I don't think need a goaltender that can steal games, but obviously it's a luxury they would love to have back. Especially in games like this. And I'm glad that you mentioned the players the Panthers were missing, because in my mind, that's why this was a must-win. Not just because this would have been falling to 0-4 or 0-2 if they'd lost, but they were down Tkachuk and Barkov for the whole game. Reinhart missed about 10 minutes. They had other players heading to the locker room, at various stages in the game. But, I mean, they're missing their two best players and other core players at various stages in this game. This really felt like a must-win that the Canucks had to pull off. So I'm incredibly glad that they did, courtesy of Miller in overtime. I thought that again. I mean, just talking about the chemistry of Garland and Höglander. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but we can't go through the third period without talking about that 2-on-1. Garland sells the shot so well. I thought he was going to take it, slides it across to Höglander, and I mean, best chance of the game that doesn't go in, robbed by the inside of the post. But I mean, the chemistry like that, and again, another chance that seemed to come off of nothing is that was just a break-in, a little bit of a lucky bounce, clips the linesman, Pettersson finds it, sends it to Garland, rests history. But another great break-in by the Canucks being able to turn a chance into nothing. But Höglander, I mean, he's going to find the back of the net with a shot like that soon.
I mean, yeah, we saw it in the Flyers game where he ripped one past Samuel Ersson in that game. In this particular one, honestly, I thought it was in on the first angle. I was like, oh, that's the inside of the post. That's in. Like, that's in the net. I thought it, or at least like had ricocheted like in past the goal line. So when I saw the replay, I was like, oh, he was that close to finishing. I mean, that's what you need from players who are trying to who have to make a place for themselves, essentially. Like, not that Höglander is on the outs on the far end of the roster or anything, and is gonna get is one mistake away from being a scratch or something, but just that ability for him to show this specifically to start this season, he's really shown that he is capable of playing big minutes in big games, and he's going to be a huge positive for you when he's on the ice. And I think Rick Tocchet is noticing that more and more. Garland, obviously, he's so good every time he's on the ice. He's such an energy guy. I mean, he has been the Canucks' best player through the first 4 games of the season. Just he's able to create every single time he's on the ice. It just and plays like that. It's such a smart play to make, that hockey IQ to sell that shot and know that Höglander is going to be there for that shot opportunity is a high IQ play from a high IQ player. Those guys are getting all the opportunities that they deserve right now to get to really eat up a big chunk of minutes here over time.
No, absolutely. And I think that a narrative that a lot of people, including myself, are perpetuating in the offseason is that this Canucks team is now being constructed for the playoffs as opposed to the regular season. And I think that guys like that in games like tonight really do kind of prove that, where I don't think our record is going to be anywhere near as good as it was last season personally. But I think we've got a lot of guys that in key roles are just playoff guys up and down. One that I just have loved since joining the Canucks was Kiefer Sherwood. He finishes every check with such aggression, yet does a pretty good job of keeping them clean almost every time as well. I think that him, Höglander, Garland, energy guys like that are going to be able to provide energy no matter who they're with. That's the thing. The versatility of these players, the ability to stand up for themselves despite none of them being huge guys, and being able to play that really physical, kind of wear down the opponent's style of hockey, I think is the kind of hockey that will benefit you a lot more in the playoffs than it does in the regular season where you've got different opponents each night. In the playoffs, I think those three, Garland, Höglander, and Sherwood, are going to be hell to play against for opposing teams.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously got to get there, and I mean, a long ways away for everybody, but you got your first win 4 games into the season. They're at kind of the same place they were to start last year, which is good to a degree, but you definitely love seeing guys like Kiefer Sherwood finishing all of his checks and everything. He's such a lightning rod on the ice. And yeah, as far as building it, yeah, you're building a team to go deep in the playoffs. They're a team that is, still needs a few pieces clearly. There's clearly some stuff missing, particularly in the blue line. But as far as what you're getting out of these guys early on, even in the games that they outside of maybe the Tampa game, all of the games that they've played in so far, you've seen flashes of, well, even in the Tampa game, frankly, you've seen flashes of a team that can win with convincingly and consistency. It's just been, okay, can you put all those pieces together at the right time, especially for a team that's had some issues when it comes to starting out a season before, and how that sometimes has snowballed into just a disaster point. I think tonight, yeah, this is the type of game where if this goes pear-shaped, feeling a lot less confident about themselves. The fact that they did win out in the end with thanks to contributions from all through their lineup is gonna bode really well for getting some positive momentum going.
No, absolutely. I think that in Tampa Bay, it definitely wasn't only getting goalied, but I feel like that game slightly came down to getting goalied. There was a lot of really good chances in Tampa that I thought just a goaltender like Vasilevsky's caliber, playing some of the best hockey that he's played, especially in recent years, got goalied. And I was afraid that was going to happen again tonight, honestly. Bobrovsky really bailed out his team a lot of the times. I thought the Canucks really were the better team tonight overall through a full 60 minutes. I think you can make an argument maybe the other way in the first, but I think the second and especially the third, the Canucks really did take over. Now, talking a little bit about overtime as well, the 3-on-3. Interesting decision by the Panthers, as I believe for quite a bit of it they had only forwards out there, at least for a couple shifts, which was interesting. And then of course that final one, a classic JT Miller overtime winner. I can think of at least 3 or 4 games where we've seen that exact thing where he just burst of speed up the right side, fires it cross ice to the top corner. And I mean, even a goalie of Bobrovsky's caliber is going to struggle against a finish like that from JT Miller. And good to see the Canucks finally getting an overtime win.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you mentioned it. You mentioned it there with the Panthers. Literally on that goal, on the Miller goal, it was Lundell, Reinhart, and Samoskevich on the ice, all forwards, playing with Quinn Hughes, Miller, and Besser on the ice. So yeah, that's a case where maybe with a defenseman, maybe with Gustav Forsling out there or Aaron Ekblad, maybe they're not that room doesn't open up. But so much of that is also just Quinn Hughes noticing the amount of extra time and space, especially off that right hand side, that Miller can escape to if he can just get him the puck. He has the foresight to just step back, give him the pass from into the neutral zone, and Miller just has to skate through, and he shot that puck perfectly. Like you had to place that as perfectly as you can with Bobrovsky challenging out as far as he was, and he nailed it. And again, that's a goal that, as far as the momentum of the team goes, could bode so well for them going through the rest of this road trip.
No, absolutely. I think especially because you're feeling a little dejected starting the season, 0-1-2, but the last 2 losses, especially the one at Tampa Bay, I thought for the most of the game, they played really well. They played hockey that we want to be seeing from the Canucks and just couldn't quite get the win. Tonight felt like one of those games where, again, playing really good hockey. I didn't think it was a great 60 minutes, but for the most part of the game, and especially the second half of the game, playing some really, really good classic Canucks hockey. And so to be playing the game you want to be playing and still losing, that is, as you said, really tough on morale. It's tough to be able to push through that kind of defeat. So to not have to do that, to finally get that win, is amazing. And I think that for any fans trying to panic, I'll remind you that after 4 games last year, we had 4 points. It's been 4 games this year, and we've got 4 points. So I definitely think that we are completely fine. The ship has been steadied. Now, of course, it can always be unsteadied again, but I thought for the most part, this was a really great game to get things back on track for Vancouver. So unless you have any other points about the third period, we'll head to our overtime period where we do our little recap, look forward to the next couple games, and anything else, and respond to chats as well. If anyone has any questions for Lachlan or I, please feel free to send them away, and we'll answer now. But if you don't have any other things, then we'll go.
Other than give Kevin Lankinen his flowers. Big game for him. He was spectacular.
Oh, absolutely he was. So, 4th period here, the overtime on Game Over Vancouver. We are, of course, looking to get some more money from LaRouche, which is a Quebec version of a crowdfunding service. Game Over Network, of course, an independent production focused on community inclusion and quality people. If you're interested in supporting the Game Over Network, we do have crowdfunding options available. In the description of this episode, just down below, we have a link to our Patreon page below, and we are getting a page through LaRouche, which is a crowdfunding model similar to Kickstarter for companies originating in Quebec, which we are. If you have any ideas for what you guys would like to see for giveaways for different tiers that we hit in our crowdfunding, please let us know. We're happy to accommodate different things. We are trying to raise $15,000 through LaRouche. If we hit that goal, we get access to some government grants through the Government of Canada that will help us keep keep the Game Over Network afloat. So please do consider donating through LaRouche. The page will be below in the description. Thank you again for all your support, whether you like, subscribe, leave a comment, or just watch for a few minutes. We really appreciate you stopping in and joining Lachlan and I tonight covering the Canucks' first win of the season. So in our overtime period, we'll first have a look at some of the questions in chat. Sammy Baines asking, do you think Reinhart makes Team Canada?
Oh, I mean, he's got to be up there, no? Like that's you'd be really hard pressed to leave off a guy who had 50 plus goals last season. Like that's and is coming off a Stanley Cup. Like that's I mean, I think he's got to be at least in the conversation for sure. I know Canada really likes their centers who can be wingers as well type of deal though. So, yeah, if he takes a lot of faceoffs, maybe.
It is tough. I know what you mean, because the thing is if he was a winger, like a natural winger himself kind of thing, I think there's no question. But you look at the center depth for Canada, and it's
well, that's why I'm saying
nuts.
He actually will have a good chance, is because they like the ability to
to be able to play, yes,
a guy,
yeah,
to throw a guy, because he is a natural center.
Yeah.
So the fact is, like, they like having as many guys who can play center and wing as humanly possible.
Yeah,
so I think Reinhart's he's got to be, like, because there's the Four Nations Cup coming up, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's got to be fully in that conversation. They would be crazy to leave him off for sure.
No, 100%. I think especially when you think of just classic goal scorers and guys with ability to just finish. Guys with the finishing ability in this league. I mean, second in goals last year to Austin Matthews, who's obviously a lock for Team USA. I think having a trigger man like Reinhart on Team Canada would be nice. And as you mentioned, that champion pedigree as well, especially such a recent champion pedigree, really goes a long way. So I do think Reinhart makes Team Canada. I'm going to agree with Lachlan on this. As much as it would be fun to play devil's advocate, I can't fairly take that. Liam Higgs asking, with a big game for Lanks, is it going to be a 50-50 split or an even 55-45? We did touch on this earlier. I think both Lachlan and I do feel that Tocchet is a coach that does like to ride the hot hand, and so I do expect to go back to Lankinen, especially because Lankinen played very well. He didn't just get the win. I think that he made some really big saves for Vancouver, and outside of his puck playing, there really wasn't a whole lot to pick apart about his game, at least I thought. For Kevin Lankinen. So I don't know, unless you have anything else to say on that, Lachlan, I do expect to see Lankinen getting a few more starts than Seelovs.
I mean, looking at their schedule going forward, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Lankinen plays Philly, and then I think the game after that is Chicago. So, which I think is a perfect game to give a goaltender like Seelovs essentially to, it's not so much an easy win, but just an opponent that is that in theory, if your team is playing properly, it shouldn't matter like where you should have a very like calm night on the ice as the goaltender in for the Canucks in that game. So I think, yeah, you'll see. I think it'll still be pretty even, to more or less, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if at least right now Lankinen starts getting a couple more here and there.
I like the way you phrased Chicago. Phrased like a man that does not want to jinx his team in any way, shape, or form.
Doesn't want to jinx them. Doesn't want to give them bulletin board material. I mean, you got to be a little nice, but I mean, come on here.
Yeah. They're not exactly a cup contender. It should be someone that the Canucks can defeat as they've had a schedule. So, we kind of are touching on it right now, but looking forward for the Canucks, I think that I just want to see them continuing to play the staples of their game and not getting thrown off by a somewhat shaky start. I don't expect to see the lines changing too much. I do think the one that we could see is Sprong subbing in for either Baines or, as you pointed out, possibly Oman, depending on if they want to see that offensive touch. I do think that neither Baines or Oman is particularly bringing a quality to the Canucks that can't be replaced by Sprong, even if they are marginally better defensively. I think Sprong is much better offensively. So I do expect, maybe not expect, but I do think Sprong will stay back in the lineup. And then the other, I think, pretty big decision will be Derek Forbort missing tonight's game and potentially a couple more games. Sounds like it's going to be very short term due to personal reasons. When he's back, do you expect to see him right back into the lineup, or will it be Eric Brandstrom for the foreseeable future? Or Juleson?
I think, knowing the Canucks, they'll probably want to get Forbort back in there pretty quickly, but at the same time, I think if Brandstrom keeps showing like positive strides, I don't think it would necessarily be at the cost of him coming out of the lineup. I mean, especially again in today's game, like he wasn't. I don't think there was no point in this game where he was a net negative in his own end, right? So I think if anything, it's a guy like like Desharnais or Juleson who ends up getting the scratch when Forbert comes back. I kind of again don't mess too much with a winning lineup. This group of 6 did win a game, so even maybe if Forbert comes back, maybe you don't see him jump back into the lineup right away. Maybe if things are still running smoothly for the Canucks, they'll kind of keep rolling with this group.
They do tend to do that, and I think I agree that of the players to be substituted out, even though Branston was the most recent addition, I would like to see him staying in. Honestly, I think if you're going to substitute out anyone, I mean, obviously you have to juggle lineups a bit. Branston can play both sides, though, so that helps. I haven't loved Desharnais' game at any point, particularly as a Canuck thus far. I understand what the team sees in him, but I think that, a lot of the Canucks goals against throughout this season, you can pinpoint him not necessarily doing... He might not be the sole reason it goes in, but not necessarily doing his job to protect the puck either. So I think that if you're going to take a defender out of the lineup, he's who I'd like to see falling out for Vancouver.
Yeah, I mean, pass it to Bullis. Daniel Wagner pointed it out himself where they were playing on the Brandstrom and Desharnais were on the same pairing. And it was Desharnais that was the one that was causing defensive breakdowns and giving possession back to Florida, as opposed to Brandstrom, even though Desharnais is touted as the more defensive shutdown guy. So I think that's kind of what you're looking at. I'd be rather see the guy who has a little bit more dynamic ability get more opportunities than a very specific kind of defensive specialist that Desharnais would fall into.
No, absolutely, especially if Brandstrom can be able to take what he's done in the AHL and bring it up to the NHL, as he looks like Quinn Hughes down there. Some of those highlights from Abbotsford, quite ridiculous. So that's nice. And then, of course, upcoming schedule for Vancouver as they continue this... no, they're not done the road trip. They've got one more.
Two more.
Yeah, 2 more. Thank you. As they look to continue this road trip, I am hoping to see them at least split these last 2, if not come out with both. Come back to a 3-game homestand with either an even record or a win in hand would be a really nice position for the Canucks to be in as they look to climb the ladder.
Here's my thought process. I think these are both must-wins for the Canucks. Not necessarily because, it'll doom their season if they don't, but... like I said before, Chicago is kind of okay, if you lose to Chicago, that says more about you than it does about them kind of thing.
The Bedard show, baby.
The Bedard show, but he doesn't have a lot of help around him yet, aside from...
the Teravainen show, baby.
Ilya Mikheyev. And then the Flyers game, one thing that I will point out to viewers and listeners is it's no secret that Rick Tocchet loves to win, like really circles the calendar on those games against Philadelphia. Like, and as a former Flyer, like not only that, but also as a former coach of the Penguins as well. Yeah, like that. But like those games in Philly at the Wells Fargo Center matter a whole lot to him to win, or at the very least, he wants to see his team give a full effort in those games and really and give it the full gusto. Because I remember last year they had one of their worst efforts, I think, of the season early on in Philly as well. And I remember just that was the post game was the most mad I've seen Tocchet in his entire tenure here about a game. So that matters. That game against Philly on Saturday, it may not necessarily scream huge important game on the calendar to every Canucks fan, but it certainly, I think, will to the locker room and to the coach. So I would look for them to really come out with some jump in that game as well.
No, absolutely. As you said, Chicago really should be a win. Philadelphia, the only reason that I said at least get a split is the Canucks don't seem to do well against Philadelphia. I've got no idea why, whether it's their system, whether they just don't do well against Philly, but not just this year, the last year, and even the year before, I think the Canucks lost most of their games to Philadelphia. So, as you said, would be really nice to come away with a pair of wins looking forward for Vancouver. But we'll see if that happens. So, just hit the hour mark. I think this is a pretty good area to wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts about the game, or shall we bid everyone adieu?
I think we covered pretty much everything. It's been fun being on the show with you. Hopefully come back sometime in the future.
No, absolutely. We'll have to have you again. For those watching, if you want more Lachlan content, and yes, you do, you can follow him at Lock in the Crease, Lach in the Crease on Twitter or X. And yeah, some more great goaltender content from our very own Lock in the Crease. I have been Zach Clarke. Once again, Game Over Vancouver. So much fun. This was my first time hosting the show here at Game Over, so it was a lot of fun to be able to get to do that. And of course, there are plenty of other shows on the Game Over Network. If you like multiple teams like myself, huge Senators guy as well as the Canucks. If you like other Canadian franchises, or if you just want to hate watch your rivals, check out the rest of the Canadian Game Over markets. All the channels are linked on the main Game Over Vancouver channel and on the Game Over Network. And every Canadian team has a post-game show right here on Game Over, so you can check out all of that content here on the Game Over Network. Once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate all the comments, subscriptions, likes, and viewers throughout the show. Thank you for everyone. Thanks again to Lachlan, and we will be back again after the next Canucks game, hopefully with their second win of the season. Thank you all for watching. Thank you to my guest, Lachlan, and have a great night.